It's got to be Yashica. Yashica is your camera. It's got to be Yashica. Yashica.
Today we are gonna talk about the Yashica Electro 35, aka the poor man's Leica. The Yashica Electro 35 was a Japanese rangefinder mass-produced in the 1960s and the 70s. Back then, it was a highly advanced product. It had a very good light meter and a shutter control system. Yashica called it Electro 35 and put this small atomic structure badge in the front of the camera to emphasize the fact that this camera was very much electronic, unlike many other cameras back then, which were very much mechanical. There exist several versions of the Electro 35. The most common ones are the GS, GT, GSN, and GTN. G means gold because many electrical contacts inside the camera were gold-plated. S stands for satin chrome, which is the material the camera body is made of. T stands for black. So basically, GS and GT are the same camera except the color. The later GSN is a little bit more advanced because it features a hot shoe mount, while the GS only got a cold shoe. The light meter of this camera is very interesting. You can see this light metering window is basically another lens of the camera. When you change the ISO setting, the aperture in this tiny lens is changing as well. The shutter of the Electro 35 is established because it's electrically timed instead of mechanically timed. In other words, the shutter speed of the Electro 35 doesn't have to be, for example, 1/15th, 1/30th, or 1/60th. It can be intermediary, for example, 1/18th, 1/35th, or other random numbers, which makes the exposure more accurate, at least theoretically. The first advantage of the Electro 35 is affordability. It's being sold at approximately $100 as of today. The price rises moderately in the recent years thanks to the endorsement of Spider-Man and Asian pop star Jay Chou. But $100 is still a reasonable price for a decent rangefinder camera. If you are starting out on film photography, you don't want to spend a lot of money, the Electro 35 is a good option for you. The second advantage is the lens quality. It got a 45mm f1.7 lens. 45mm is pretty versatile. You can do both portrait and landscape. The f1.7 big aperture can also give you nice bokeh. Some people even buy a broken Electro 35, dismember the lens and modify the lens mount so they can use the lens with a digital camera. The third advantage is that the camera body is elegantly designed and solidly built with a lot of chrome material. Even if you're not using the camera to take pictures, it's worth your money for collection and decoration purposes. While there are quite a few advantages to the Electro 35, there are also disadvantages as with other cameras. Number one is the electrical shutter. Yes, it was pretty advanced back then in the 1960s and 70s. It's far less reliable than mechanical shutter. Over time, electrical shutter is prone to malfunction. Since there's no manual shutter speed setting in the Electro 35, if the light meter or the shutter is broken, you pretty much can't use the camera completely. You can still press the shutter button, but it will always be 1/500th, which makes the camera almost useless. If the light meter is broken, you may find some camera experts to repair it, but the value of the camera doesn't justify expensive repair fee. Second disadvantages is battery. You need a PX32 for the Electro 35, but it's not being made anymore, unfortunately. What you need is a battery adapter, so you can use a 4LR44, which is readily available everywhere, to replace the original battery. If you don't want to buy an adapter, you can use a CR123A together with two pieces of LR44. The final disadvantages is bad handling. Every ring on this camera is difficult to turn around. Also, the focus patch in the viewfinder is too small, so it's a little bit difficult to focus. There are several versions of the Electro 35 available on the market. The most common versions are the GS and GSN, but in reality, there's not much difference between the two cameras. It doesn't matter if it's a GS or GSN, just buy one that's cheap and preserved well. The second advice is to test the light meter and the shutter if you can. If the light meter or the shutter not working, the camera is pretty much useless. If you're buying online and you can't test the camera, please double check with the seller that the light meter is working properly. Number 3. After you buy the camera, you probably need to replace the light seal inside the film chamber. Because it's a 40 or 50-year-old camera, the original light seal very much decayed. Bad light seal can cause many problems. The first problem is light leak, obviously, which would ruin your photos. Secondly, the debris from the spoiled light seal can contaminate the shutter or aperture of your camera. That's all for today's video. Stay tuned for more interesting products.